If you watched the last episode on my Turbo EFX R6, you would have seen that it ran for the first time in a year and a half. But in true EF fashion, it was short-lived, it was very bittersweet, because now I have to pull the motor apart, and I'll tell you why. But first, a bit of a backstory. I bought this car in October of 2022. I found it in a field, dumped, and left to rot. I brought it back home, got it running, and then very shortly after, I pulled it back off the road with the intentions of turboing it. But we hit a major milestone last week when we got it running, but now this is where we're at. So basically what happened was Ollie and I buttoned up all the little things that were needed in order to get this motor running, which included a bit of wiring, a bit of the fuel system, install the bulkhead fittings, the fuel pump. Then we decided to start off brake cleaner, and it actually fired up. And then, as you guys saw in the last video, the motor ran with fuel. I chucked a bit of 91 in it just to start it up, and it ran, but it sounded like a freaking Cummins diesel truck, and it was smoking like one too. And Ollie and I started scratching our heads because we're like, well, the motor's refreshed, the bottom end came out of a running car, came out of my AU, like what's wrong with it? After it ran, I touched all the runners on the exhaust manifold, and I realized that runner number 6 was completely cold. In the combustion chamber, there is a controlled fire in a sense. There's fuel, air, and spark all mixing together, and it's making a flame, which in turn gets things pretty hot. My assumption when I did the valve lap job about a year ago, I screwed something up. I'd maybe switched the valves around or something like that, and they weren't sealing. But even if they weren't sealing, it would still have a little bit of compression. It would still fire, right? So then we pulled out the old TEMU compression tester, but it would at least tell us if that cylinder was making compression. Now have a guess in your head what the compression number was for that cylinder. This engine on cylinder number 6 made a whopping 0 pounds per square inch, PSI, 0 PSI. We have a dead cylinder. Now, unfortunately, there was no easy way around this. Obviously, there was a problem somewhere in the head, and I had to pull the head off. There was no other option. So that's what I went ahead and started doing. So we have the rocker assembly off and the cam out. They're sitting very nicely over here. The more and more I pull this apart, the sadder I get, because I spent so much time doing this and now I'm undoing it all. But we need to get down to the bottom of this problem. I just want to pull the rocker gear off because I have read about some issues of shims in the rocker arms doubling up, and that obviously means that the valves push down too far and they don't seal against the head when they come back up. But I counted 12 shims and 12 lash adjusters slash lifters. I did replace the lash adjusters, so I thought that maybe I didn't know what I was doing back then. No issues there, so we need to keep digging deeper. So I'm gonna have to take apart the turbo and the exhaust manifold, the intake manifold, the thermostat housing, the power steering pump, etc, etc. You know the deal, so let's get to it. Now at first I thought I could get away with pulling the head off with both the intake and exhaust manifolds connected because I'm inherently lazy, but then I thought a little bit harder and decided against that. So first to come off was the intake manifold. Then I moved on to removing the power steering pump and the thermostat housing as well as the exhaust manifold. And once those were off, it freed up a lot of room so that I could start cracking off the head studs. So it's the next day now. As you saw in the previous clips, I made a bunch of progress last night. The intake manifold is off, the exhaust manifold is off, the rocker cover, the rocker gear, the cam is out, the cam bolt, obviously I've zip tied it here as well. Unfortunately, I forgot to set it to TDC, but I think I'll be able to get away with just holding the cam sprocket and rotating it slowly until I hit TDC. If you guys like bedtime stories, then spark plugs are your best friend because they tell 1,000 stories. Check this out. So these are the brand new plugs that I put into this motor. 5 minutes total of it running. Have a look at the end of the spark plugs. Can you tell which one's not firing? It can't be the one with raw fuel on it. That's out of cylinder number 6 right there. Every single one is black because it was running stupid rich, apart from this one. So we can clearly tell that there's something very wrong in the head for it to be making no compression, therefore not igniting any fuel. I'm interested to see what it's gonna look like when I pull this head off because, boys and girls, we might have some bent valves. There's only one way to find out. So unfortunately, it was unfortunate. I didn't get us removing the head because I'm an idiot and I forgot to remove the one bolt that holds the top guide to the head. So the bolt that goes through here was stopping us from lifting the head out. But anyway, the head is off and I have some good and bad news. So let me show you. So if you know anything about engines, obviously for combustion to occur, you need air, fuel and spark. And the byproduct of that is basically carbon. So cylinder number 1 is black, 2 is black, 3 is black, 4 is black, 5 is black, and 6 is completely clean because it was washed down with literal raw fuel. We already know that that's the case. We're not getting any combustion on cylinder 6. But why? Well, let me show you why. As you can see there, that valve isn't looking too happy. So it is pretty clear that we have a bent valve on the exhaust side of cylinder number 6. So we already know what the problem is. I'm not going to even bother touching this head because I don't know what I'm doing clearly because I bent a valve. I'm going to send this straight to a reputable head shop and we're going to try to get this car running as soon as possible because it literally did run, but I wanted to run on 6 cylinders this time. Good news, the top of the piston is completely fine. There's no scoring on it, which is good. Let's get that head sent off and see how much it costs me. A few days has passed since we last worked on the EF. We just got the head back from Head to Head. I could not believe how much Pete at Head to Head helped me out. But Pete, you are a living legend. Let me tell you that. He was on the phone to me. He FaceTimed me. He showed me exactly what happened with the bent valves and everything. But he got the head assembled and we got Luca from Tassie. He's just cleaning the bottom of the head. I went ahead and cleaned the deck. So now we just got to plonk it back on and in a couple of days it should be running again, which is really exciting. Anyway, we'll crack on. Pretty keen. So at this point, I told Luca and Ollie to go home because I had to go to work, but because they are amazing friends, they ended up staying back in my garage and assembling the rest of the parts onto the head. Thank you so much to Luca and Ollie. I did not expect them to do it, and I definitely treated them to a good dinner afterwards. But because of them, the motor is now back together, and later in the video, you're about to see this thing run on all 6 cylinders. Now before I let you guys hear how this thing runs on all 6 cylinders, I need to let you guys in on a little bit of a secret. So obviously we know that this thing bent a valve and that's why I pulled the head off. Well, it actually bent 2 valves on 2 separate occasions and I was kind of too embarrassed to film that process because yeah, it shouldn't have happened, but there is a very good explanation for it and I feel like you guys need to know. You guys might know that this thing has an AU bottom end and an EF head. I just assumed that because I'm using an EF head, EF cam, EF sprocket, everything in the top end is EF. They have different timing marks to AU motors. I'll show you that right now. So right here is this very weathered book that I've kept. Actually came with this car when I originally bought it. On the back page here is a diagram of how to set this EF motor into TDC. Now as you can see here, this mark, the timing mark, needs to be aligned 3 degrees past the top of the head. Now obviously can't show you guys because the rocker cover is on, but basically what it means is that timing mark needs to be 3 degrees above the top of the head here. Now if you have an EF motor, that's all well and good. I'm not too sure why, but EF motors or pre-AU motors, EL hybrid and below, they have a different timing setup to an AU motor. As I said before, I just assumed that because this is an EF head, you need to time it up like an EF motor, but I was very wrong. So what ended up happening was originally we bent the exhaust valve on cylinder number 6. Now afterwards, we put the head on again, try to time it up like an EF motor, and we actually ended up bending this valve, number 1 exhaust valve. I did some research and basically, it doesn't matter what head you have on this. I could put an SR20 head on this motor. It's whatever the bottom end is, right? An AU motor, you actually have to set the timing 3 degrees before 12 o'clock on the timing mark. So it has to be, if this is 12 o'clock, it has to be about here. When the timing mark is set to EF, the valves are actually halfway open. So that's why we ended up bending a valve. But anyway, I want you guys to hear how it sounds. So let's cue the video. So I just got back from work. I cannot even express how thankful I am to Luca and Ollie for doing this because they didn't have to, but I think they're as keen as me to see a run. All right, let's go. Holy crap, that's loud. Holy shit. It's not even running properly. Once it's actually tuned and everything, that's gonna sound fantastic. That's like a RB.
Oh yeah,
straight
that's
up.
Good.
Intech, best motor. Once you stop bending valves, of course. So now that this motor has officially run on 6 cylinders, it is time to finally button up everything for the very last time, and we can hopefully take it for a drive. The OGs all know how long I've been building this car for. It's been a very long time. I've been off and on. Stick around for future EF videos because it's not long until it drives. But anyway, until next time, see you later.